I hear comments from people like, I'm too old for that. And
Yeah.
that could be, you know, bicycling, it could be jumping. And they're limiting themselves based on their age alone. And I always feel like that's worth calling out. It's like
Yeah.
age does not limit you from jumping. You could have, structural physical things going on, but age alone is not part of it.
I think that all comes from that common narrative where people think, I am not going to be as capable. I am going to decline. It is inevitable. And you see it everywhere. You see it in the press. You see it in films where it's represented so badly. So it's totally understandable that people think, actually, yeah, that's just what happens. Today's episode is a little different. It's a shared conversation that will also be appearing on Agents of Movement podcast hosted by my guest, Erin Eleutario. If you've ever caught yourself saying, I'm too old for that, or wondering what aging well really looks like, this one's for you. Erin's a fitness professional who helps older adults stay strong, capable and confident, not just in the gym, but in daily life. Together we talk about how our culture shapes the way we see aging, why play and curiosity matter more than ever, and how small everyday movements can change how we feel at any age. It's an uplifting, thought-provoking chat that challenges the myths of aging and celebrates what's possible when we keep moving well. Here's my conversation with Erin Eleutario. So today we have a bit of a different conversation between Erin Eleutario and myself, Wendy Welpton, that's going to be published on both of our different podcast platforms. So my podcast is Make Movement Matter and Erin's is Agents of Movement. And so this is going to go out to both, which is really exciting because we thought we wanted to have each other on each other's podcasts, but we thought, well, why not do it at the same time? Which makes lots of sense. So we are going to be talking today basically about movement as we age, as it's something that we're both really passionate about. We come to from sort of different directions, but we have lots of crossover and a lot of agreed thoughts on it. So we just thought it would be a great conversation to share with you. For those of you who don't know me, perhaps from Erin's podcast, I am the founder of Reclaim Movement, which I founded 5 years ago. And I focus on everyday movement and the power of how much that can really change how you feel and how you move in your life, particularly to age well. I came to that because when I was 40, I'm now 51. When I was 40, I got into chronic pain through some kind of injury that I'll never quite know what it was. And I was in pain for 4 years and very immobilized and very scared and fearful about my future. So I had to do a massive deep dive to find out what was going on, although I didn't particularly find out a lot, to be honest. But I certainly found out that even though I'd been a really active person, exercising, ticking that box, I hadn't thought about the way I was moving the rest of the time. And for me, that was the missing ticket about understanding the difference between the way we're moving in our modern world compared to the way the body was kind of designed is the wrong word, but the way the body needs to move or has needed to move for the hundreds of thousands of years. So that's my little quick potted backstory. Over to you, Erin.
Yeah, thanks, Wendy. Yeah, so I came into it via the fitness route. I've been a mover. I loved exercise. And so I went on to become a personal trainer, a group exercise instructor. I worked in a clinical setting for a bit in a cardiac rehab setting where it was mostly pretty much all older adults that were there for, cardiac rehab, for pulmonary rehab. So it was a clinical setting, but I really saw how much value exercise and movement brought to that population. It was very different than working in a commercial gym. And I really, really enjoyed working with the older adults. I didn't think I would, but I really loved it. And taught Silver Sneakers classes, which is a group exercise class designed for older adults. And I just have kind of gone down that path. I worked actually for Silver Sneakers for a number of years, and I've just had a heart for working with older adults because I saw how much quality of life it brought to the older population, and they were going about it for that quality of life aspect. It wasn't for the aesthetics so much as being able to live life fully and be able to do the activities that were meaningful for them. So I've stayed on that path, and I have I currently work at a senior living community and a senior center, and I teach classes there. And I still definitely have a fitness side to me. I do teach fitness classes, but I try to infuse things like parkour, which is what I teach at a senior living community. It's a parkour um, based fall resiliency program. So we're really having a lot more fun with movement and getting people the confidence and the ability to move around their environment in different ways. So it's less fitness like, and it's a little bit more explorative, creative, fun. And I do try to infuse that with classes that I do that are a little more traditional fitness, but so that aspect is still part of what I do. But I really have put a lot of emphasis on how we can get people moving throughout their lifespan, whether that is through a sport or through walking or just trying to have their daily activity lives, like what you do, Wendy. Support that so that they don't stop moving as we grow older, and finding ways that is meaningful and fun for them. And even if it does mean going to a gym, it's yes, and how do we continue moving throughout our whole day and not always use what our modern lifestyle gives us, these affordances. So I've been promoting that a lot as well. So my podcast is, I really promote people that are keeping people active throughout their lifespan, and ways that we can do that and how we can be more effective leaders as physical activity leaders. How can we bring a sense of belonging and connection to classes? How can we empower people? What is the language that we need to use in order to make those older adults feel like they are capable, because our culture doesn't always support that.
No.
So that's really what my focus has been on, is working with that population and addressing those psychosocial aspects that come with physical activity. Because I think that's an important part of working with any human being. There's an individual there. It's not just a body. So that's what I'm doing now.
And I, just from as you were speaking, when I the problems I see are that people start to pigeonhole themselves um earlier and earlier in life than well, I don't think you should at any age, but earlier and earlier in life. What do you see in that? Are you feeling like it's earlier and earlier? Are you sort of sometimes a bit surprised by the age that you have people who are seeing themselves um, as though they should be more inactive? That common narrative that we don't like.
Yes, definitely. I mean, I hear comments from people like, I'm too old for that. And
Yeah.
that could be, you know, bicycling, it could be jumping. And they're limiting themselves based on their age alone. And I always feel like that's worth calling out. It's like,
Yeah.
age does not limit you from jumping. You could have, structural physical things going on, but age alone is not part of it. So yeah, I do think, and it is interesting. I do see it younger, and you see people's movement patterns younger. Like, I mean, you
Mm.
see people, I'm in my 40s, and I see people my age, and getting up off the floor is like, wow, that looks like, they're
Challenging.
using assist. And yeah, so I do think it's happening younger, and younger, which is kind of interesting. And I don't, yeah, and there's a lot of thoughts that I have around, like, culturally why we, why I think that is.
But I think that's why people also, so when I get messages, often people will say within the first sentence their age, because I
Mm.
think they're trying to convey something by that. And obviously, I don't know what their lens is on how they see age, but often, but it's rarely that they're sort of saying, "This is how young I am." If you see what I
Oh.
mean, it's
Mhm.
normally to give me an understanding that this is where they're at in life, and therefore, perhaps in their mind, these problems would inevitably be happening, and so on. And yet, it doesn't answer any questions for me, because obviously you can be 65 and moving like a 80 plus year old, and the other way around. And so you never really know. So you need to dig further. But I think that always, given that it's so many people that will always put their age in, I think that all comes from that common narrative where people think, I am not going to be as capable. I am going to decline. It is inevitable. And you see it everywhere. You see it in the press. You see it in films where it's
Mhm.
represented so badly. So it's totally understandable that people think, actually, yeah, that's just what happens. And yet
Yeah.
it's a factor at play where if they believe they can do less, they will do less.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. So how do you respond to that when somebody says, "I'm X age," and
Yeah.
yeah, what's your response?
I will use. It depends on the type of message, because obviously if
Mhm.
there's a bit more in there and it doesn't make sense to respond to it, then I won't. But sometimes I will say, um, something along the lines of, well, your age doesn't really matter in this conversation, because I hope that, in the nicest possible way, I hope that they see that as empowering, so that they believe, okay, well, I didn't realize that XYZ was a possibility for me. So yeah, I try to
Mhm.
slightly change their viewpoint, even just in those initial messages, because I think that shift is so key in the way that we see ourselves, and
Mhm.
the possibility for progress, and the fact that we can still adapt at every year of our lives. We are creatures that are adapting. That's the way our physiology works. And yet I think
Mhm.
people forget that. And
Mhm.
partly it's a bit like, I think we sort of think we're born with the bones that we have. Let's just say, talk about bones. We're born with the bones. They grow to a certain size, our height, if you like, and then nothing ever changes again. And yet it's changing every 10 years or so, I think, mainly on average for bones. So we're constantly regenerating, and
Mhm.
therefore constantly adapting to the stresses put on our systems. But I think we forget that. We kind of think we're set, don't we?
Mhm. Yes, most definitely. And like you said, you're talking about earlier, like people think I'm such and such age, and they feel the importance of telling you that. And culturally, we do have a lot of messages that I don't think that we're realizing what that's communicating to people of all ages. So I mean, and it's in the images that we show, and it's also in the images that we don't show. Like you don't see a lot
Mm.
of older people doing certain activities. You don't see a lot of older people. You don't see mainstream media images of people rock climbing or skateboarding or, roller
Mm.
skating and so when people don't see themselves represented in those images, they don't see somebody their age doing those activities. Becca Levy had wrote this book. I don't know if you've what is it? Decoding age. I can't think of the exact title.
I
Becca
don't know
Levy
that one.
she's done an amazing breaking the age code. There you go.
Okay.
She's done some amazing research on how that people's viewpoints of aging determines what they're capable of doing
Yeah.
and their longevity. So it becomes like this internalized ageism thing where they think, oh, there's
Mm.
nobody older doing those activities, so I shouldn't be doing those activities. And so then they stop doing those things and they stop aiming for those kinds of things because again they don't see themselves represented. And this is where I really feel that social media has come into play. And
Mm.
when people don't see themselves in mainstream media doing these activities, and that now people have the social media outlet to say like, here I am
Yeah.
70 and I am rock climbing, and they're showing themselves doing these things.
Yeah.
And you see that their Instagram accounts have just exploded because I think they're showing like a different image and so much more hope that we're not seeing in mainstream media. That I think that that's really contributed to their popularity on
Mm.
social media. So I think that that's actually been a good avenue in a lot of ways, to show what's possible when we're not seeing it,
And
typically.
yet sometimes I think it's great, and that is chipping away at it.
Hmm.
And yet when I have conversations, for example, with my mum last at the weekend, who's 80, who had a fall 11 weeks ago. She fell off her e-bike, I will
Mm.
have you know. So she was being active, and she was being courageous particularly for her. But unfortunately, she broke a bone in her pelvis and her elbow. So she's been having this sort of recovery phase and checking in on her expectations of herself. And she has lost some muscle mass,
Mhm.
for sure, and is now having to work to build that back. Um, so it's been a really interesting experience for me because it's directly relevant. And when I talk to her about those, I try to have those positive messages. I'm not sending her
Mhm.
loads of Instagram reels of people jumping out of planes at 100 because I think she's not quite there. But the response can often be, yeah, but they're specific individuals. They're quite different to the
Mm.
rest.
Mm.
And actually, she's not wrong, because it does
Mhm.
take a certain amount of courage, and vavavoom that is rare. But in the whole population, not just the aging population, the older
Mhm.
population. If you think about it, there's lots of
Mhm.
people who wouldn't do those things.
Sure.
So I think the representation we need, but it just doesn't quite sell so well on something like social
Mhm.
media, is just being really active.
Mhm.
As you said, more just things like biking,
Mhm.
things that are perhaps a level up just from walking, or walking long
Mhm.
distances, carrying, hiking, but nothing
Yes.
too exciting and fancy, but things that people can really see as achievable. That
Mhm.
kind of representation is,
Yes.
I think that's where it's at, because that
Mhm.
can really appeal to the masses. And
Mhm.
in my work, I talk a lot about kind of just moving that needle forward a little bit, rather than the big exciting
Mm. Mhm.
goals that
Mhm.
unfortunately, in every age group, the fitness industry, they love to do the big thing. We're very
Mhm.
all or nothing, aren't we?
Mhm.
As
Mhm.
a Western world anyway, and we love to see the big thing, and it's kind of go big or just don't go at all.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to avoid. And we want to
Mhm.
start, in my opinion, celebrating the 70, 80, 90-year old who is going off and walking an amazing trail. They've done it in their own time. There is
Mhm.
no goal to do it quickly or in any way. They've just
Mhm.
done it, and they're
Mhm.
proud of themselves. That's where I see that the
Mm.
magic lies.
Mhm. Yeah, and to me, I think this is a both and thing, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I see 90-year-olds jumping out of planes, and do I want to jump out of a plane? No, but I think about
But you
like,
love it. You love watching
yeah, but
it,
I mean, I
don't
think
you?
it could just kind of, at least it just opens up my
Yeah.
mind to
Yeah.
like, maybe I don't want to do that exact thing, but it's also showing me that there's somebody in their 90s, like living life and doing adventurous things that I
Mm.
can define that for myself at 90. And it might not look like jumping out of a plane, but I think it can just kind of get that spark of people like opening up their mind a little bit more to what's possible at the age, even though it doesn't have to look exactly like
Yeah.
that. So yeah, I definitely see your point that it can be like these big extravagant things because that's what sells really well on social media. And it is in the everyday, it is in the
Yeah.
everyday things. And I think that that is, I think showing that it's much more accessible to people.
Yeah.
Like just carrying things, practicing getting up and off the floor. It's not these grandiose, you have to go achieve some kind of sport where you have to go to the gym and do these big lifts. Um, yeah, I think that brings a lot more accessibility. It's not as like big and flashy, but it's so important of like, how we keep people moving. And when we have people like, I mean, there's just so much that keeps people from not moving. And I think about,
Yeah.
working at a senior living community and assisted living, so much movement is being taken away from them. And uh and it could be, you never know, everybody has their individual things. It could be for good reasons. They might have some real issues that they can't do laundry, they can't do some of those day-to-day tasks. Um but I also wonder, like, how do we still encourage movement with that group, and how do we make it inviting, and how do we keep people moving even in like an assisted living facility where that's not really their
Mm.
priority. Like they might offer like a chair exercise class, but that's really not the focus. And I don't know how you think about that, or what are your thoughts on how might we try to encourage movement in that type of setting?
I mean, I've heard you talk before. I know, and I see brilliant ideas online.
Mhm.
for me, it's always about play, because
Mm.
there is something about the aging population where, and I kind of get it. Why should I? But I'm not interested in doing 5 reps of this and I mean, to be honest, I'm not hugely interested in that myself at the moment. I love doing weights. I do various
Mm.
classes and so on, but
Sure.
sometimes, I'm kind of looking towards the end in a way that I certainly wouldn't want to promote. I can't see that that encourages people in. Whereas when, as soon as you put sort of playfulness into it, not only do people respond with a smile, and as soon as people are smiling, then that they are not thinking about something else. Not
Mhm.
having to get through. There's that enjoyment. Then there's the connection, because you're usually smiling with the other person, laughing at them, with them yourself, or whatever, in whatever way you're doing it. But also, it just relaxes you, I think. Playfulness, not play as such. Plays, again, it's a tricky word to use,
Mhm.
because some people think, well, that's just what kids do, and yet it really isn't. It's that playfulness, the things that bring joy, that
Mhm.
are movement based,
Mhm.
um, that make you so much more sort of relaxed and freer. And people find themselves doing more than they thought they would if you said to them beforehand, right, let's not say this is playful, not or a game. This is what we're going to do, and sort of broke it down in movement cueing terms. Then they may say, "Oh, I don't know if I can do that." And yes, when it's a game, and people are challenged, or there's teams or whatever, suddenly they're doing things that they didn't realize that they could do. And I just think
Mhm.
that is a really important way of bringing in movement. And if you can have ideas that are things that they can do outside of the class, that are together, then, and even, I'm now I'm now brainstorming for your movement
Yeah,
method.
no,
But
yeah.
if they can have little leagues and things where people
Mhm.
are, just really simple games that can keep going through the week, then,
Mhm.
it's all about fun. And
Yeah.
goodness me, life's so serious.
Mhm.
Exercise can be so serious. So much out there is really, to my mind, negative, where it's, you've got to do, you should be doing it. If you're not doing, why? It's got to
Mhm.
feel natural and fun for you
Mhm.
want to do it. And I'm sure that applies even more as you age.
Yeah, most definitely. And I agree. Like it has to be fun. And some of the things that I've done at my senior living community that it just like brings me a little bit of joy is if you can set something up in the hallways for people to participate in, and you're not saying like come do this, but if they see other people doing it, like
Yeah.
people passing by and even the staff have jumped in, I'll create like tape obstacle courses where there's just tape on the ground
Brilliant.
and like different color tape. And so you get to choose, do you want to step on the blue tape or do you want to step on the green tape? You have to get from here to here. And so people are doing that. And then passerbys, my favorite is when like the staff come by and they're like, oh, I want to try that too. And so now it's just like this little
Everyone's in
game.
together. Yeah.
Yeah, and now they're doing that with the residents, which to me is just like that. Then you're
Mm.
kind of getting some intergenerational stuff in there, and it's just trying to look like. And I keep finding ways like, how do we make this like inviting? Like, how do we? It's just an
Mm.
invitation. It's an invitation to walk down the hall and like read bad dad jokes that are on each side of the hallway as you're walking down, just because like we need them to turn their heads. Like
Yes.
there's like a lot of movement that is missing as we get
Yeah.
older, and it's like the tiny things, but it's like the little things are the big things. When they're not moving their head, they don't have awareness about their space. So I keep thinking of ways like, how do we make it inviting? Um I'm always open to more ideas on ways that we can infuse this, so it's not like come
Yeah.
exercise and do these things. It's like, hey, here's a course, do you want to try it out?
And I think that's worth thinking about from outside of an assisted living community,
Mhm.
because, you know, everyone wants to have fun. As you say, intergenerational, that's a great one, because a lot of people, as they age, have grandchildren. And therefore, fun ways to play with your grandchildren that you've set up, and putting tape along the floor. Honestly, I can imagine hours of fun between, well, I can imagine tired grandparents, quite frankly, again, granny, again.
Yeah.
but we, if we get into that mindset, and if we start to show that play can be at any age, playfulness can be, then I do things like put chairs either side of a door, and just a broomstick across to get for a day, so that people have to get into the kitchen a different way, because everyone's, particularly the teenagers, going in and out of that kitchen an awful lot. And just little fun things that are sort of an obstacle that make you think differently about your day and your life. Really, and obviously the nice thing with that is you can put the broomstick on the seats for a while, then you can put them on the back, so you've got higher and lower. And just getting out, you can use a simple balancing beam. I've got a 2x4 from a builder's merchant as your balancing beam, if you're a little bit more capable. Things like that. When you present that as an opportunity, it's like an invitation. Most people will probably look at it and think, why, and potentially walk around it. But everyone you're curious, so you have a go. And I think the importance of inspiring that curiosity, prompting ourselves, knowing it's hard for us to keep moving in different ways. So using our own environment, whether it's our home, whether it is at work, if you've got the ability to change things up. I've talked before on my podcast about the simple but brilliant idea of not having waste paper bins in your office, having them all as one central point, and you're not allowed to amass litter, so you have to walk. Not so exciting and playful, but just ways that we can bring in the importance of just moving that little bit more, means that we will feel better. We have to feel better because we've had to move a bit more. And I think those are the sort of key things that my sort of constant conundrum is, how can I encourage people to do things like that? And how simple can I make the idea? Not because people can't grasp complex things, but how simple so that it's so easily added into life, and they quickly achieve the fun. They feel better straight away, just because they think, I shall just give that a go, because it's not too much. For me, those are the important things. I hope you're enjoying the conversation. I'm just taking a quick break to ask you a question. Have you started to notice that the everyday things you used to do without thinking, like getting up off the floor, lifting the shopping, or hopping over a stile, now take more effort than you feel they should? Well, if your answer is yes, you are far from alone. And I'm excited to tell you that I've written a book to help you. It's called Move Well for Life: Unlock the Life-Changing Power of Everyday Movement. As you'll know from listening to this podcast or following me online, I don't talk about chasing fitness trends or imposing rigid routines. Instead, my message is all about learning how small, natural movements woven into your daily life can help you feel stronger, more confident, and ready for whatever life throws at you. Move Well for Life is available to pre-order now, and it's out in January here in the UK and Europe, and later next year in America. You can find the link in the show notes to read more about it, or simply search Move Well for Life and Wendy online. I firmly believe that every movement counts, and it's never too late to reclaim yours. Now, back to the episode. As we're talking about today, the importance of that as you age. So seeing that as a possibility, not thinking this is just for the grandchildren, leaving it out when the grandchildren have gone, and keeping going. I think that's so important, because we lose so much of that fun playfulness as we age. What about you in terms of populations who are younger than your assisted living? So, for example, in your exercise classes, what sort of age range are you teaching, and how would they see the work that you do along these lines with the assisted living and so on in their normal day-to-day lives?
Yeah, that's interesting. So the class that I teach at the senior center that's near me is a younger, pretty capable group. And I try to infuse some of the things that I do at the senior living, which is like 80, 90-year-olds, to like the 70-ish year olds that, again, are are pretty capable. And some of them like, the traditional fitness. But I have added it into like just part of like what you said, like coming into the room and there's tape, and before you put your weights away, you have to walk on the tape lines, things like that. And I've always wondered like if they're, because like you said, play can sometimes be for older adults. It's like when you pitch it as play, like they might have mixed feelings about that. But I think you don't say that. You're just like
Mm.
an invitation, like, hey, here's an invitation to do this thing. And yesterday we were playing games with like yoga blocks and how to stay balanced with perturbation and somebody pushing you. And they're really open to those things. Sometimes it's the reverse. I almost have to sell it as like a fitness exercise. This is a core
Mm.
exercise. This is a balance exercise.
Yeah.
And for that group, I mean, that's,
Yeah.
it works for that group.
Mm.
I think you just kind of have to know your audience. But I do want to try with the group more of like an adult fun recess class where it's just like we're doing movement, and it's not going to be fitness, but it's, we're going to do different movement patterns, and to see how that goes over. This would be like something I'm going to trial this in October to see how it goes with this group. But the senior living, it goes over really well because they want something fun, they want something interactive. There's such
Yeah.
a need for social interaction with that group. That isolation is such a huge factor, that I love it when somebody comes by and they can see what we're doing in class and they want to join in because it looks like fun.
Yeah.
And there's an objective, like we're throwing a bean bag and we're trying to get it into the space while we're balancing, kind of a thing. And if it is inviting for other people to be pulled in, then I feel like that's a win, because
Yeah.
just having a class listed on the schedule for the day, exercise class, you only get certain people that come to that. That we have to find other ways to expand that reach and make it inviting for those that don't want to seek it out. Like it's not
Oh,
something
and what
that's
about those? Do you get the chance to have conversations with people it, who are tentatively looking at the board, let's say, but um, haven't been before, might be look like they might be interested? Do you find out from them what their barriers are, beyond the obvious more physical limitations?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I certainly, try to like actively recruit for my class and knock on doors when I'm at the senior living community and be like, "Hey, we're doing this session. I'd love for you to join." And I would say a lot of times what they tell me is that it's physical limitations. Oh, I have a bad knee, or like
Mm.
I'm experiencing vertigo or something like that. It seems that what they're telling me is that physical limitation, but I kind of question that, really, because
Mhm.
it's like I think that's a comfortable thing to tell somebody that you don't know that well. But I think my own perception is there's other things going on underneath there. Like there can be fear, there can
Fear.
be fear of doing falling, fear of making a fool of yourself, and now you're with a
Yeah.
group of people. Um, there's so I think there's a lot of
Yeah.
hesitations outside of physical. Not to say that that's not one of them. It certainly can be.
Interesting to talk about the physical though, because I certainly was also in the camp of when I was in pain. Um, I was very fearful that if I pushed harder to do something and then I had a flare up, I thought I was damaging myself further. But because I
Mhm.
wasn't in the acute point of of my pain, I wasn't. And it took me years to really grasp and understand that. And I think often with sort of longer term pain, the it's the other way around. It's so important for us to move in gentle ways, potentially, but just to move to help that pain. And it took me a
Mhm.
really long time to fully shift that thinking, to realize that actually to deal with pain is the only way that we can do that is by um, pushing ourselves. Feels like the wrong word, but encouraging
Mhm.
ourselves to keep moving, because I would always feel better if I did. I had to learn the things that were real triggers. Sometimes it was random and erratic and I didn't know, but I had to really get to grips with what my body was telling me and working with it. And I think that's a message again, that as we age, because often we do get things cropping up. We have little accidents, we have falls. We're always going to have falls. Is That's a normal part of life. We
Mhm.
do it less. Perhaps we do a little bit more as we age, when other systems aren't working as well. But we have to expect it's going to happen, and it's how we fall and whether we're used to dropping that height down. Because if we
Mhm.
never, I talk a lot about,
Mhm.
if we never get down to the ground and back up, then
Mhm.
it feels like an awful long way to go. Whereas if we're used to doing it, actually, it's a familiar distance for our
Mhm.
brains. Um,
Mhm.
but I think it is interesting that people do see that their pain means they should stop.
Yes. Yes. And I think the thing that has become a huge barrier that I've seen, and I've seen this time and again, is that they're in pain. Some part of their body's in pain. And so it's coupled with a healthcare provider or somebody else saying, um,
Mm,
don't do anything. Or maybe like they're well-meaning children, like, don't do
yes.
anything. And I saw this with one individual that would come to my classes, and he was having really bad lower back pain. And so he was literally told by his provider, don't do anything until we figure this out. And he took it very literally. Like
Yeah.
he sat in his room. He didn't go down to have meals with other people. He literally just sat there until they could, like, quote unquote, figure it out. And so
Mm,
now we start that downward spiral. Like, we've
yeah.
just accelerated it, because now this gentleman is
Yeah.
89 years old. He's social isolating. He's not moving his body. And that is like a big uphill battle. I feel like when somebody that's credentialed, that they said, well, my doctor told me that I shouldn't move. And I think sometimes that's taken to the extreme. I don't know what their doctor actually means, like, don't move at all.
Exactly. Yes.
But that's how it's taken. And I think it's worth, like, what I've kind of gently pushed back is there any part of your body that you can move that doesn't cause you pain? Is
Yes.
it your hands? Is it your feet? Can you turn your head without your lower back hurting? And chances are yes. So I think it's worth, like, asking people that, and trying to be curious, like, is there any movements that feel good? Like, when you wake up in the morning, is there a certain
Mm,
stretch that you like to do? And one question, and I got this from one of my podcast guests, and I use it all the time, it's such a brilliant question, is to ask yourself and the people that are around you, and if you lead people, is, what's a good movement day for you?
mm.
And I really love that question, because
Love
it
that.
meets you wherever you're at. If you're having really bad lower back pain,
Yeah.
like, okay, now I have to define, what's my movement day? What's a good movement day for me? So it's just such a beautiful question.
And it's not what's a good exercise day.
Right. No.
It's all about what just feels good when you've moved. How can you, how much, doing what, but it doesn't need to be complex or ridiculous. It's just making that, helping make the connection with someone, that you can have a good movement day. You can feel better just through moving well through the day. It's so
Mm-hmm.
simple, but
Mm-hmm.
and yet so missed. And as you say, that poor guy is sat there waiting for a day that will not come
Yeah. Yeah.
if he doesn't move.
Yes, definitely. And I think one of the things that I want to highlight, and then, in regards to just getting people moving, just daily activities, I, somewhere that I've seen people that where, again, well-meaning people, community members, family, friends, stop that from happening is by, quote unquote, helping older adults. And what I mean by that is, I mean, I've seen this in a number of ways. I have a member that comes to the senior center, and she only lives like 3 or 4 blocks away. And so she chooses to walk a lot of days into the senior center, and she carries things. Like, she has bags of things that
Brilliant.
she's bringing for friends. And she was telling me, she's like, every time people see me walking and carrying things, people stop their cars and ask if they can, like, give me a ride, or that if they can carry my things. Like, she gets asked this all the time, because she's like, I don't know why they asked me that. She's like, I guess it's because I'm an older person, I'm walking with gray hair, and I'm carrying things, but she's like, I'm capable
But
of
I'm not
doing this.
struggling. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not struggling, but she gets asked all the time. And I thought
That's
that was
amazing.
so interesting.
Yeah.
And so now we've taken movement away from that person because,
Yeah.
somebody has thought that that's not something she quote unquote should be doing.
And not just movement, but also responsibility for themselves,
Hmm.
having agency over their own choices for the movements that they're doing. And so there's the sort of the mental side to that as well, where in, as you say, well-meaning, but it's kind of saying, oh, you shouldn't be capable, you're
Yes,
not capable. And yet she's saying, I'm
I am.
absolutely capable. And I kind
Yes.
of love my granny lived to 100. And in the UK, we would say, she was a bit of a battle axe about things. By beyond a certain, I'd say over her 70s, she just said it how it was. She decided she didn't care how people would take what she said. So she was very forthright. And she would absolutely say, no, I'm fine. Don't,
Yes.
what,
Yeah.
which would then put back on them, because there was this sort of slight minor aggression to it. Why are you asking? And therefore
Hmm.
check yourself. But you know what, I
Yes.
I think this goes back decades, um
Hmm.
even to actually a very young age. And in Britain, I don't know if it's the same in America, but I think it is this sort of the chivalry, where the
Mm.
outdated chivalry, where men would hold doors open for women, which is, that's very polite and very lovely, but they
Mm.
haven't had a push, and we don't do
Mm.
enough pushing in life. So actually pushing a heavy door is a great thing to do.
Mm.
And also I talk as well about the importance of never again saying, this is one I love because I have to check myself in it all the time. Never again saying, could you pass me the such and such? If someone's the other side of the
Mm.
room and the thing that
Mhm.
you need is there, get
Mhm.
up yourself and go and do it. Always get up yourself and
Yes.
go and do it, because otherwise it's those
Mhm.
pockets of movement that are taken away
Mhm.
across the generations. But I know exactly what you
Yes.
mean about noticing that people are trying to be more helpful. And I think particularly if someone, for example, going back to my mum, she feels more, she's lost some weight, so she feels
Mhm.
smaller, she feels more frail. So
Mhm.
my tendency, she was here all the weekend, my tendency was very much to, oh, can I? And when we were walking, because she's just got back to walking without any sticks, I found myself being anxious about the bumps in the pavement. And I kept saying to myself, no, 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 absolutely don't say anything, just
Mhm.
be nearby just in
Mhm.
case. And then I'm
Mhm.
perfectly capable of catching if she does topple
Yes.
at all. But
Yeah.
don't say these things, because it's
Yeah.
so key,
Mm.
for example, that we have camber in different, we walk on different surfaces, because if they're always flat, then we are going to struggle and worry about falling.
Mhm.
um yeah, no, it's such a
Yeah.
good
And
point.
yeah, and I think it comes down to like always asking. Always, always ask. Like, do you want an extra hand with that? And I just, like I'll leave it like that. If they look like their hands are full, do you want extra hand? No. And you got to leave them alone. And I think there is that chivalry of like, let me open the door for you. And even when I've seen like people say, no, I got it. No, 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 I will. And you're like, no,
No,
like
no, I will.
really do not get it for that person. If they have said no, I mean, good for asking, but if they say no, like we should absolutely
And
respect
it might
that.
be about rephrasing it. We need to
Hmm.
come up with a good way of saying those things, where it's actually the expectation is that you can do it, but just to double check that you're not wanting the help, if you see what I mean. So more, are you good with that? Or something along those
Yes.
lines, where
Hmm.
you've said to them, I totally expect that you can do this. But
Yes.
I also want to be polite in case you might be worried about struggling. So it's
Yeah.
always how we frame things, isn't it, that's so important. And
Yeah.
the semantics, the wording that we use in life, going back to the common narrative about aging,
Hmm.
and the sort of over the hill type terminology, where people
Hmm.
say things where and the other one I tried desperately not to use is the word old, because when are you old? No one is old. We're all still aging every day. We're getting older. So, it is interesting how
Hmm.
we say things to people, but also how we say things to ourselves. Those expectations we put on ourselves, because it's incredibly often you can sort of notice these things once your lens is open,
Yeah.
onto this, then you start to notice it. absolutely
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah. And for some reason we've like equated old equals bad. And so it's like if you say somebody you look old, like that's a you're you're putting somebody down.
An
And I always
insult,
think like that
yeah,
needs to be questioned. Like, why
yeah,
is old equal bad?
yeah.
This is just a life, part of
And yet
life.
it's not in some countries.
Hmm.
So, okay, here's me going for something that I am not quite sure about. So write in. But I think it's in Japan, there isn't a word for elderly because the respect is the other way around. It's
Mm,
absolutely different. And you see people who are in their 80s plus doing movements in the park and getting up and down to the ground because they've lived at ground level all their life. So it very much is all part and parcel of this modern world we've created for ourselves. It's all about comfort, all about convenience, and it's killing us. And
absolutely.
without even
Yeah.
talking about food. And that's a
Yeah.
whole nother section. But even just in our world, we
Hmm.
literally have created this still, safe, cosseted, risk-free, health and safety has gone mad. There wasn't a health and I don't know if that's the same in the US, but we talk about health and safety. We didn't even have that 10, 20
Hmm.
years ago. No one even really thought about it. You just had to stumble or whatever and you were fine. But it's gone mad. It really
Yeah.
has.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely has. And that's so interesting you said about the Japan thing. I was listening to a different podcast
I
and where
hope it
somebody
is
was
Japan.
well, they do things on the floor. I think that there's a
Yes,
culture
yes,
of
yes.
eating on the
That
floor,
is right.
getting out onto the
Yep.
floor. And this guy that's from America was on, talking about this, and he asked somebody, he's like, well, what do your older people do? And they're like, they get
The
on the
same.
floor because that's what they've been doing their entire life. But he
Yeah.
had this idea that that the older people couldn't do that. But it's
Mm.
just because in our culture, they don't have to.
But sadly, apparently, so in those a lot of Eastern cultures, there's still people write to me from the East saying, "Yeah, but squatting is what we do all the time." When I do a post about doing a deep squat, because it's so alien in the West, and yet but sadly, I got messaging saying, "Well, it's also leaving us because chairs are becoming so much more of a thing, and everything's becoming more Westernized." And I think that's even a factor in Japan as well. And you
Yeah.
just feel like saying, no, hold it where you're at. You've got it. We're learning from you now, or we should be.
Hmm. Hmm. Yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think it's just bringing that awareness up because this wasn't on my radar, honestly, until like maybe 3 or 4, maybe even 5 years ago I mean, we both talked about Katie Bowman and it was like, phew, it's like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, this is like, you're just kind of getting baked into this culture and this modern society. And you don't really realize how much movement has been taken away from you until somebody else points it out. So I think you're doing a brilliant job of that, Wendy. And I appreciate people like yourself that are making that eye opening and making it accessible. This is a day to day thing. This is not an exercise class thing. So I appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. And also, and just to big you up back, I love your ideas for the way that you see that you can keep moving as you age. And I think that's, again, it's something that's not talked about enough. It's not talked about the benefits and just how much you can see people progress in their whole way that they live. And that's absolutely critical because I think often we're so reductionist and we end up talking about movement really in purely physical terms, sort of, oh, your X is sore, so if you move it this way, it might feel better, and not even the whole body. But it's about so much more than that. And obviously, your work is brilliant because of the amount you talk about social connection and community, and about how that those interactions, intergeneration, they're so critical. They're even more critical in some ways as we age, to be able to keep going and to just feel good about
Mm-hmm.
ourselves. And if there's any sort of takeaway messages from this podcast, hopefully people have just felt like they've had a little bit of a light switched on, or it's backed up what they've been thinking already about how they see their own futures, how they have the expectations they have perhaps for their parents or people around them who are in different situations to themselves, and that it's important that we do think differently, that we, and you talk about how important it is that we're leaders of this. And in fact, just it'd be really useful for you to just talk a little bit about how you
Hmm.
see that working, particularly
Hmm.
for people who are not fitness industry people,
Hmm.
but it obviously overlaps as well.
Yes, definitely. I think that there's a lot of influence that this mature adult population has in being leaders of physical activity. Because we talked about this internalized ageism, people believe I'm X age, I shouldn't, quote unquote, be doing certain things. That when we have people that are older and they're leading these activities, I think it's showing people that possibility. And so a few of the people that I've had on my podcast is one lady that's in her 70s and she's teaching low flying trapeze to women in their 60s all the way to their 90s. And I think there's real power in that, in the
Yeah.
fact that she is within that age group and
Yeah.
teaching this and showing that possibility. I think there's something special about that. And so I think people that are, if you are, a mature adult in that mature adult population, I think there's a call that I have to those people that are leading an active lifestyle and see the value in that, to be leaders in their community. And whether that is leading some kind of physical activity class, leading hikes, because just by being a leader, I think for those activities, you're showing possibility. Like, so Hildy is the trapeze instructor. What she's communicating by having that class is like, this is
Amazing.
possible. You can do it. This is the space that you do it in. And that's what you're doing just by offering that. So it can look at a variety of ways, but I think being leaders and inviting people to come with you on your movement journey, whether that's hiking or carrying objects, because so many people are limiting themselves that they need to see. It's helpful for them to see peers living that lifestyle. So that's my call
Yeah.
to the mature adult population: be leaders in your space.
And I think you can extend that to just be a leader in your own micro world as well.
Hmm.
So start saying to yourself those things about capability and possibility at whatever level you are finding yourself at, and check in on how you speak about things to your partner, to your family, older, younger, to your friends around you in your community, to try to start to change that narrative, because the narrative is made up by us all talking and the way we communicate and our expectations of each other. So in a sense, there's the leading the sort of movement by movement groups, but then there's also the leading the mental shift, and we need to do that sort of, it's grassroots up. So yes, call to arms,
Yes.
everyone.
Yes.
Let's grasp this, and everyone who can try to make those changes. And even if I think
Mhm.
if you've sat with this conversation and you're at a slightly different place to us in your thinking on it, but still just have those conversations with people, ask them what they think and whether they
Mhm.
think this is a real thing. And conversation is the most important thing, hence why we're doing this podcast, of course.
Yeah, definitely. That's such a great point. Yeah, it doesn't have to be in the official, movement leader space, but yeah, it's how we show up for ourselves and for our community, and people take note of that, so we can all take that responsibility of advocating in various ways.
I think this has been really, really interesting. I've loved chatting with you, Erin. It's been so um I feel inspired and empowered and excited about my own future, let alone everyone else's. So I hope everyone else has
Great.
felt like that. And it's been really fun to just have a two-way conversation. A really great idea. So thank you, because you came up with that one. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, thanks, Wendy. This has been delightful. I feel like I could go for another hour, but this
I
has been
know.
great. I love it. Thank you.
Well, maybe there's a part two in it somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks so much.
I hope you've enjoyed listening, and if you have, you can help by doing three things. First, press the follow button to tell podcast platforms you want to listen again. Second, please give the show a 5-star rating and leave a review about why you liked it. And third, I'd love you to share it with friends and family or on your socials, for which I'm truly thankful. Finally, if this podcast is making you want to start reclaiming your own movement, join me in the Reclaim Movement membership for classes, both live and by replay, and countless videos of mini movement breaks to add into your daily life, covering practical and fun, important natural movements. Visit reclaimmovement.co.uk/membership to get started with your 7-day free trial. See you for the next episode, and thank you so much for listening.